We all know that hemorrhage is still one of the leading killers in this country. And at RxMP, we're actually developing first-in-line therapeutics to stop excessive bleeding, prevent it and treat it. There we go. So we think we've got an attractive risk-reward profile in this company, that we can address multi-billion-dollar markets, but use a small investment that gets us to very significant and promising clinical milestones. We got a team that can do this in terms of management and advisors. We got a platform technology in these red cell membrane particles that you're looking at right here. Worldwide patents. In our lead product, we've got good preclinical data, efficacy data, as well as safety, and we've got a very clear clinical path to final approval, but we're going to stop at proof of concept and be acquired. So the market potential overall is about $4.6 billion. There's about almost 7 million people, or 6 million people being transfused in the United States every year for bleeding, but we're going to start out with a subset of those patients. The patients undergoing spinal fusion, you heard maybe some of the spinal fusion stories in the kids earlier, but in adults, if you have more than 3 levels being fused, you can lose up to 20% of your blood volume on a table, and that's very common, right? And there's been medical economic studies that have demonstrated that if you lose more than 2 liters, that increases morbidity as well as hospital costs in this specific indication. The current therapies are inadequate in the sense that they have very severe adverse events associated with them. Recombinant factor 7A is expensive, but it causes off-site thrombosis, but it was approved for hemophilia. It goes 95% off-label to treat excessive bleeding in the US, Europe, and Japan to the tune of $1.5 billion annually. I think that gives you a sense of the unmet need there. These red cell membrane particles, they're floating around in our bloodstreams right now. They're the product of red cell degradation. But it's been found that in a variety of studies, particularly cardiovascular surgery studies, that the higher your RMP levels, the less likely you are to be transfused and the less number of units you get if you are transfused. We don't collect these from people. We take packed red cells that are approved for use. It's an allogeneic product that's made from hundreds of units at a time. We put them under a proprietary high-pressure extrusion process that took us a couple of years to actually develop. We end up with this sterile lyophilized product. It's purely mechanical that has stability in the freezer or the refrigerator for over a year, unlike blood in 42 days. We've vetted our plans with the FDA and have got a nice plan to efficacy. So how do they work? These tiny little red cell membrane particles, when infused into the patient, are only in circulation for 15 minutes. They have an effect for 2 to 3 hours. They go directly to the site of bleeding, bind to the collagen, recruit platelets and coagulation factors, have no off-site adverse event or thrombosis, and they accelerate the clotting process. They don't initiate it, and that's the big difference between these and other products. They will correct all platelet and all coagulation problems, whether it's genetic or drug-acquired as well. So just one science slide. We've seen cross-species efficacy in multiple studies that have been published. This is a rabbit liver laceration model. In the black line, you lacerate the liver. These animals try to exsanguinate and die in 2 hours. You give them the product IV after they've been lacerated, and they have a 30 to 40% reduction, and the animals survive. We've seen the same thing now in hemorrhagic stroke as well. And what's really interesting there is the animals recover back to faster and to a better functional state. So in case of the lumbar spine surgeries, there's about 600,000 US, Europe, and Japan. A good portion have some significant bleeding associated with it. We think we can address this market prophylactically at the time of surgery to about a $900 million market. But the bigger market, once we're approved for excessive bleeding, then this market can be expanded. Recombinant factor 7A did exactly this model to some extent, but you can expand it to other indications that have excessive bleeding associated with them, and once you start adding this up, it becomes very, very significant. So our clinical development, preclinical and clinical development plan actually for a product like this is quite straightforward. We're raising $3 million to finish out the IND at this point, an additional $2 million on top of that to a total of $5 million raised on this to get to the end of phase 1, which the FDA has told us was a highly innovative single study phase 1 that satisfies all the requirements. We'll then raise another $5 million to do the proof of concept. This is an eye chart. All we can say here is that everybody on this has been there and done that. We have advisors in the RMP space, advisors that are well known to the FDA, also from the FDA, and key opinion leaders in neurosurgery, anesthesiology, and hematology. These are companies that we've talked to. Quite a number of these companies have become significantly interested in this, and several of them have said they would be interested in potentially acquiring the product at the end of phase 1 or possibly into phase 2A. So finally, so why invest in us? $5 million gets you to the phase 1 endpoint, which is a potential exit. Very large markets, platform technology, because we can potentially functionalize these, clear measurable endpoints in total amount of blood loss, capital efficient, worldwide patents, and a team that can make it happen.